Hi, this is Mindy Lighthipe, and today I'm going to show you a video on how I make my own transfer paper using a graphite stick and tracing vellum. Here I have a drawing that I did on tracing vellum. It's the preliminary drawing, and the reason why I work on tracing paper is that I like to work on the front, the back. I like to be able to erase, correct any mistakes, and I also like to work out my composition. Tracing paper does all this for me without the worry of ruining a good sheet of paper that can be very costly. I save my drawings on the tracing paper so that I have a record of what the drawing looked like in the line drawing. There are many different methods for transferring a drawing onto a clean, good sheet of paper. One of them is using a light box. Another one, you could use a window, or you could use something that's called transfer paper. Transfer paper is very similar to the old-fashioned carbon paper. You would never want to use carbon paper because that is absolutely not erasable, and that would be a terrible thing to use. But there are several brands that are on the market. Two of them that I am familiar with is the Sorel paper and also Sally's. Sorel is spelled S-A-R-A-L, and the manufacturer makes it in red, white, yellow, blue, and graphite. You definitely want the graphite one. The other ones are used on for different things, and they're not erasable. They have a wax coating on them, and if you were to transfer in blue, you would have a blue line, a blue outline. If that's something that you want, you could experiment with it, but right at this point, we're working with watercolor or gouache and even colored pencil, but you really would only want to use the graphite at this point. I do not recommend Sally's. The reason why I don't recommend it is that that particular brand has a wax component in the graphite, so that when you transfer your drawing, the line usually comes out very dark, and not only is it dark, but the wax prohibits you from being able to make any erasers. So basically what happens is, if in the process of doing the transfer, my hand wobbles or the line isn't as accurate as I would like it to be, I then do not have the ability to erase it without ruining the piece of paper. So, as I said, I would not recommend Sally's. I have prepared a drawing for today, and the drawing that I did is on a piece of tracing vellum. The tracing vellum that I recommend is Canson Vidalion, like the onion. I prefer to use a vellum, a tracing vellum, opposed to a tracing paper. Tracing paper is similar in consistency and weight to tissue paper. It rips easily, it crinkles, it doesn't take erasers very well, as it will rip. And so I find that tracing vellum has a much more sturdy surface. I use tracing vellum all the time and keep my preliminary line drawings on the tracing vellum, and the vellum lasts for years without disintegrating or yellowing. The first step is that you're going to take your tracing vellum, and here I'm going to use a graphite stick. The graphite stick is pure graphite. This particular one is a 2B. I recommend the 2B because it's soft, and it has 4 sides, square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the square, one of the square edges down, and I'm going to work in a circular motion to very quickly cover the surface of the tracing vellum. By working in the circular motion, it helps me to get an even coverage. Once I've gotten the coverage, you can see that there's a bit of dust on the top. And one of the things that I'm going to do to eliminate that dust is I'm going to take a paper towel. I usually use Bounty, And I take the paper towel and I'm going to buff it into the surface of the paper. This means that I'm actually trying to not wipe it up, but I'm actually trying to press it into the paper. This minimizes the dust, and it also helps to get the graphite into the surface texture of the tracing vellum. After I do this, you can see that a lot of the graphite has come up, and it may be a little paler than you want. You can go back and you do a second layer, and again, buff it with the paper towel and get it as even as possible. In order to further minimize dust and to take the graphite and get it to stay affixed to the tracing vellum, I'm going to use rubbing alcohol. I use the isopropyl rubbing alcohol on the clean piece of paper towel, just a few drops, and again, working in a circular motion, I'm pressing the rubbing alcohol into the paper to get a light coating. This dries almost immediately, and then you're ready to use your new piece of transfer paper. Now you can use the graphite stick. You can also use like a 2B pencil, or you can use graphite dust if you want to purchase that. This particular, you can see the difference here. On this one I used a pencil, and the lines are a lot more noticeable. There's a little bit more of a texture than what I got when I used the stick. Okay, now one of the things that you may want to do is you may want to put a little check mark or something up on the top in the corner. This way it'll allow you to, I don't know if you can see that, but it'll allow you to know which is the top side and the bottom side of this. And so the next step is to take, this is just regular copy paper, and I'm going to put down my watercolor paper. Okay, and then on top of the watercolor paper, I'm going to take the graphite with the paper that I just made, and I'm going to flip it over so the check mark is below, which means that I'm putting the graphite face down onto my good paper. And then I'm going to take my drawing, and I'm going to place the drawing on top of that and make sure that it's centered onto the piece of paper. Let's move this down a little bit. Okay, so I want to make sure that my image is nicely centered. Now, one of the things I do is I put repositionable tape. Okay, and I go and put this in here so that it holds the drawing in place, because as I'm drawing, I certainly do not want to end up with the drawing shifting or moving, because then I'll have lines where I don't want them. So the next step is to take 3H pencil, it could be a 2H pencil, 4H, whatever, but a harder lead pencil. And one of the things that you really do not need to do at this point is press too hard as you're transferring it. If you do press too hard, what's going to happen is you're going to make an impression or an indentation into the paper. And you really do not want to do that, because if you're using this for colored pencil, watercolor, gouache, any of the mediums that you would be working with, you're going to end up indenting it, and it's going to make it very difficult to come out. You can also use a colored pencil when you're going over this, and this way you'd have an idea whether you've gone over the drawing or not, you know, so that you don't go over with a second line. And I try to make one continuous line rather than sketching. And when you sketch, your line comes out kind of blurry, and it doesn't really come out as a nice clean line. Okay. Now I'm going to end up redrawing this after I transfer it, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. In the transfer stage, your lines may be not as graceful, but at least there will be one continuous line, and you can come in and you can redraw it so that it has a better flow to it. But I find that the preliminaries of getting my drawing, the first thing that I'm going to do is I spend as much time learning about the subject, doing my preliminary sketches. The sketches turn into the drawing, and then the drawing, this is a very simple composition because it's only a single insect on a white piece of paper. But if I had other elements, I would have this all figured out before I went and transferred, and I would not be drawing on my good paper. I would be drawing first with the composition. Okay. I don't put an enormous amount of details in my preliminary drawings, even though it is sort of a finished composition or a finished drawing itself, because I find that I'm going to have to redraw it, and some of the very, very tiny little aspects of the drawing are going to have to be redrawn, and that the transferring of it, it would lose it, and I would not get as good a drawing. But I basically need to maintain all of the overall proportions and make sure that I have all of the number of, the scales or the nodules on the, on here when I go into the antenna, to make sure that I have the same number here as I did on the other side. Okay. And here you really are not looking to do any erasing. You're just looking to trace over the pencil line. And like I said, one of the things that you can try if you want is to, you could do it like in a red colored pencil or something, and the brand that I would use would be a Verithin by Prismacolor. Verithins are a harder lead pencil, and I would not use any of the other colored pencils because they're too soft, and your line would end up being very thick, and it's not something that you would find appealing when you peel these two layers off and look at your drawing. So Verithin by Prismacolor gives a nice hard edge, and I actually will use it to outline different things, whether I'm using a colored pencil or sometimes watercolor or gouache, because it helps to sharpen up some of the edges as I'm working. All right, so now hopefully I've gotten all of the lines, and then after your drawing is done, you're going to peel it up, and I usually peel the bottom part off. Okay, and I lift up my tracing, and I lift up my drawing, my transfer paper, because I want to make sure that I have the drawing in place and that I didn't miss anything. Okay, so this is a very faint drawing, and one of the things that I really like about this technique is that if I need to, I can come in and I can actually erase whatever mistakes I may have made, and I can lift it up with a kneaded eraser if I need to. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to zoom into the drawing a little bit so that you can see how delicate and pale that line is. I find that the other transfer methods come out very dark, and this beetle is actually a very dark colored beetle, so it wouldn't matter if the line was dark. But if it was if this was something that was going to be painted with yellow, I certainly would not want a very, very dark line. So I like this for this this type of method. Okay, now my next step would be to come in and redraw. Thank you for watching this tutorial on how to make transfer paper. I've made a list of the supplies that you can download if you want and where you can get them. And I hope that you found it useful. If you'd like to leave a comment on how you transfer your drawings, that'd be great. We can share. The other thing is that if you have any questions, please leave them and I'd be happy to answer them. And who knows, every time I get a request for something, it's a video that I can make for you and share with you. So I hope that you have found this useful. Please visit my website, www.botanicalartpainting.com. This is Mindy Lighthipe, and I look forward to hearing from you. Happy painting.